Escape Artists is on Twitch. Why don't you join us? On Wednesday nights, Alistair reads a bedtime story, and Sunday mornings, we do a few hours of chill gaming. Plus, we have interviews, special guests, pickup streams, and more. Visit twitch.tv/EA Podcasts and follow us to be notified when we go live and access VODs of past broadcasts. You can support us there too, with monthly subscriptions as well, or if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can support us for $5 a month for free. Free. Visit escapeartists.net/Twitch for a full walkthrough.
Escape Pod, Episode 942, The Eye of Applethorpe, by E.J. Delaney.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm Valerie Valdez, your host for this episode. Our story this week is The Eye of Applethorpe by E.J. Delaney. This is an Escape Pod original. E.J. Delaney is a speculative fiction writer living in Brisbane, Australia's River City. E.J.'s short stories have appeared in Daily Science Fiction and the podcasts Cast of Wonders and Escape Pod, as well as the Reinvented Detective Anthology and in limited edition print collections from Air and Nothingness Press. E.J. has thrice been shortlisted for Australia's premier speculative fiction accolade, the Aurealis Awards, in 2021, winning in the category of Best Fantasy Short Story. Our narrator, Eliza Chan, is a writer and occasional narrator of speculative fiction. She has narrated for Pseudopod, Podcastle, Cast of Wonders, and finally, Escape Pod 2. It amuses her endlessly that people find her Scottish accent soothing. Her #1 Sunday Times best-selling debut novel, Fathom Folk, is inspired by mythology, multicultural Asian cities, and diaspora feels. It was published by Orbit in February 2024. Find her on Instagram at ElizaChanWrites or on her website, www.elizachan.co.uk. Now, get ready for a poignant presentation of progressive poetic prowess, because it's story time.
The Eye of Applethorpe by E.J. Delaney. Narrated by Eliza Chan. Una's dad once said to her, "You never know what you've got until it's gone." Spring had turned, and they'd come cycling up the highway, 14 kilometres north through a land bedecked with rocky upthrusts and pink-tinged blossoms. The big apple loomed before them, appraising its empty kingdom from atop a stubby pole. Una hadn't understood. Where the apple's expression was unambiguous, a spray-painted frown, her dad's was hidden behind thickets of beard. He rested on his tiptoes astride the bike, as big and improbably balanced as a granite boulder. Sunlight danced through his cherry candle bristles. Una held his hand. To her, the world had seemed perfect. She was happy and loved, and she'd recently befriended a turtle where quart-popped creek curved past the homestead. What could he have had, she wondered, that wasn't there anymore? It was on Una's 11th birthday that she first began noticing the changes. It wasn't just her body. No sooner had her singlet tops shown the first faint swell of breast buds that her dad booked her a session with the eye. On the next sunny day, its inbuilt education matron gave her the talk, appearing as Lucy Osborne from the history module and answering all her questions. Pubic hair, periods. Una was fine with all that. But there were other differences. Odd changes in people's behaviour. Like how her father's tiredness gave way to worry when he came in from the orchard at night. Or when Finlay Bissett Brown had knocked on their door that morning and, scuffing his feet, presented her with an apple carved in the shape of a turtle. That was just weird, right? Not that it was a bad job. The apple he had used was unripe, so the paired shell patterning was greenish rather than Cripps pink rouge. He'd peeled the skin off the lower half and cut flippers and a rounded head with seed eyes. It was actually rather sweet. But that wasn't the Finlay she knew. It wasn't the grinning boy next door whose usual practice was to throw her an apple and call out, "Enjoy it while it lasts!" A reference not to the apple, but to this 1 week of the year when she was as old as he. Today, Finn hadn't smiled or met her eye. He just mumbled something incomprehensible and stood there. Baffling, Una reflected. She knelt by Billie Eilish's favourite log and broke the tail from Finlay's gift. But good news for you, Billie. Cannibalistic treat. The merry river turtle regarded her through keen dragon eyes. Then it stretched its neck out and took a nibble, chin fangs ghost chomping at the offering. Una ran a finger across its tufted green algae haircut. She murmured, "There once was a boy, Bissett Brown, who wouldn't wear pants around town. Though apt to play dumb about showing his bum, he sat on a cactus and ow!" "That's a limerick," she explained. "They're supposed to be rude. Not really a turtle thing, I guess, but Finlay would have liked it. Old Finlay, before he turned weird." She fed Billie some more apple. Boys, right? They sat a while in companionable silence, a newly minted 11-year-old and a pond punk veteran at peace in its shell and skin. Then a breeze sprang up from the east, rippling the trees reflected upside down in the creek. The looming ghost gums turned hazy. "Well," Una declared, "time for my present from Dad. See you later, B.E." Leaving the turtle to munch on its effigy, she marched off for her 1-to-1 with Banjax. The one thing that mystified Una most of all in the whole of Applethorpe, and as far beyond it as her dad had taken her on co-op exchange days, was that no one else wanted to spend time with Banjax. Of the Eye's myriad aspects, Banjax had always been her favourite. Ever since she was little, and the solar panels weren't quite so dinged up, and he'd read Dr. Seuss and Milgabill's bicycle to her and Finlay and the other kids, she'd marvelled at his wrinkled face, his rumbling intonations, at his way with words. And she kind of got it. When the Eye had grown glitchy and the adults began shunting schoolwork through the text interface, poetry had lost some of its allure. Jabberwocky and Up the Country were performance pieces. So too Bungliga and other First Languages poems. Without Banjax to interpret them, to give voice to their cadences and rhythms, they were like pictures of apples, or even just the word apple. They lacked the juicy crunch of the real thing. Still, Una seized each opportunity. While her peers scrimped and saved up for movie nights, she put her own allowance towards sessions with Banjax. Why wouldn't she? Why didn't they? Flummoxing, she told herself. As she left the orchard's netted rows behind, she glanced back over her shoulder at the stunted, jewel-studded trees and the children who on their birthdays would squander their chance playing mindless games. Utterly discombobulating. When she reached the ruins, she pushed inside and made her way to the central dais. Here she typed in her personal ID, then a one-off code her dad had given her. The eye opened, its twin membranes irising contrariwise to each other. Happy birthday, Una. Which aspect do you seek? Banjax, please. Acknowledged. Milky clouds swirled inside the rondure as a familiar face coalesced. A big-eared, bristle-haired old man with twinkling eyes and a prominent hooked nose. He had weathered skin and a paunchy grey-white beard. The lips beneath twitched in greeting, the default monotone giving way to a lilting twang. It's my birthday. I'm Una McCool. 11 years old, you'll find me at school. With a pickle-brain poet preserved in a jar, I'm destiny's apple, I'm fixed to fall far. A Balliol rhyme, Una identified the form. 4 beats per line, ribbing me in my own voice. But what does it mean, Banjax? Fixed to fall far? Fixed, in the sense of being prepared to, or on the verge of. Falling far, in reference to never falling far from the tree, meaning that children grow to be like their parents. So that's saying I won't be like Dad. In many respects, of course you will, but not in your love of poetry. Ah, when you give your heart to heroic couplets, when you pine for pio, or yearn for a yagao. Una considered these examples, then added, when I close my eyes and lean in, the monastic soft upon my lips. Banjax laughed. Hi, lassie, you're a poet all right. What your farmers might call a barred apple, had there the wherewithal. Now how fare you with the Burns stanza? Una made a so-so gesture. Today I picked a 6-line stave, a habby hung from bygone days, where dug this fellow Burns his grave, and grew from seed a tree of twisting whimsic ways. It made me weep. Banjax nodded. Dutifully satiric. More asinine than true, but whimsic is a nice touch. Well done, my girl. They settled into discussion then, talking scansion and enjambment, and other devices to send Una's mind soaring. The minutes flew alongside her, and before she knew it, the hour was up. Banjax offered a sad smile. And now I must away. Time and tide, young Padawan. A few years ago, he might have extended their session. Now the limits came pre-programmed, encoded. The eye was too precious, and its hardware too erratic. What couldn't be maintained had to be curbed. Una bumped back to earth. I know. But I've had a lovely birthday. Thank you, Banjax. He winked at her, roguishly complicit, as in those preschool days reading Custard the Dragon and On the Ning Nang Nong. As his avatar faded to mist, then memory, she whispered, See you next year. Her 12th birthday fell amidst what seemed a near-continuous week-long downpour. The overarching cloud cover precluded any use of the eye, and Una knew that even once the solar panels began humming again, the adults would claim precedence to consult with Banjax's scientifically minded brethren. Her own session wouldn't come any time soon. She spent the morning instead with Billie Eilish, feeding the turtle pieces of carved apple, the latest from Finlay, an intricately rendered frilled-neck lizard. In the afternoon, Her dad took her out past the orchard to where they were clearing land for an expansion crop. "We'll start with cabbages," he explained. "Tomatoes, beans. Applethorpe's climate is good, mostly, but the soil is poor. By growing veggies, we'll sweeten the ground for when we put the new trees in." Una shrugged. She loved her dad, and she knew he wanted her to take more interest in their livelihood. That, and to distract her from the dreary skies. But it didn't help. With Banjax offline, her birthday was a washout. She mooched back to the river and sat weaving salty Thalbau chains in the drizzle. Poetry had always been Una's salve, panacea for a multitude of hurts, like when she wobbled and fallen from her bike, only to write off the pain in tottering steps of a iambic tetrameter. Or when Emily Aitken had teased her about her gap-toothed lisp, and she'd snapped back with a savage, extemporised Bittenraider. Yes, poetry was a cure-all, but her work was raw, and she needed a second opinion, which she wasn't going to get with clouds clustered around and the eye closed. Her dad was off checking the new drainage ditch. Even Billie Eilish had left her torn-faced, slipping down the muddy bank and into the creek. The owl and the pussycat redux, Una decided, squinting peevishly at the sodden landscape, where the pussycat dies and the money's all spent. Suddenly, she was quite sure she never wanted to grow up. And though she outstared the Scotch mist that stung at her eyes and kept her back straight while the trees dripped and the evening closed in, still she couldn't rid her thoughts of the owl sat hunched in time, strumming his puny guitar. Una's 13th birthday dawned brighter, though still confounding. It started with another present from Finlay, an apple-carved miniature flame tree in blossom, which was fine as far as it went, but he'd still barely spoken to her in 2 years. They'd been friends forever. Now he talked less than Billie Eilish. Una couldn't understand it. She spent a calming half-hour logside, feeding blossoms to Billy. Then she set off for the ruins, kissing her dad as she passed by the homestead. The morning was cool, the air still braced with the overnight squeeze that lent the apples their distinctive blush. She was halfway through the orchard when Rory Macpherson jumped out at her like a bunyip from the shade of a crossrow. "Una of the Clan McSwin, happy Rory was Finlay's cousin, and until recently his oversized shadow in all things boyish and unfathomable. No sooner were his arms around her that she had one foot hooked behind his ankle and shoved him in the chest. He toppled over backwards. "Ouch!" he complained. "Personal space, Rory." Much though she tried not to, Una couldn't help joining the pimply adolescent dots as to what, or rather who, most perturbing, Finlay and Rory had fallen out over. She stepped past Rory and continued on down the slope, muttering, "McSwin, humph." And while the last thing she'd had wished upon herself when starting a session with Banjax was to turn up in high dudgeon, she found it impossible to shake her ill humour. Tweenage obsession raging afresh. She stomped up to the ruins and picked her way inside. The eye lay waiting, its tarnished gleam darkly befitting of a polished future brought low. "Happy birthday, Una," the Login voice greeted her. "Which aspect do you seek?" "Banjax, please." "Acknowledged." The eye opened slowly, and clouds swirled inside the ronger, extracting personality, pulling her mentor from the depths of a dreamless sleep. When he appeared, she wasted no time in putting her thoughts into verse. 13 years among the gum trees, pouch reared on eucalyptus leaves. Una emerges, boys flaunt their urges, courting birds, courting bees. "Oho," Banjax adjudged, "an Aussie bushspin on the classic Welsh clochirna. Am I to take it, young Missy McCool, that the lads you once knew have become shambling self-parodies?" "Yes. They're not boys anymore, Banjax. They're mutant, cripple-brained wallabies." "Very distressing. But then all of us change." Banjax rubbed at his whiskers. "Aye, even we bards. When we outgrow our nursery rhymes, or find ourselves moved to shape list poems into lanterns. When we take to kennings like a bowerbird to the blue." Una frowned. "Me too. Assuredly. When young Finlay sets eyes upon you nowadays, I'd wager he sees a constipated wombat." "In the sense of keeping to yourself, perhaps. More likely a lyrebird, whose proficiency of voice renders him mute and self-conscious." Wiggling his ears, Banjo recited. "Life is like a pathiavat, simple as that, clear when you're young, then the rhyme shifts, sticking its tongue out, feeling flung back in your face. Now you know that expectation, ever-changing, rules over you." Una thought for a moment, then took up the refrain. "No, no, no, no. Say it's not true. Oh, what a rude awakening. Spare me my dreams, where ravens sing and quail-egg kings hatched uncuckooed." And on they went, riding the interplay, A, B, B, C, D, C, C, E, F, E, E, G. Each stanza shifting, beholden to its forebears. Call and respond. Message mingled with form until Una felt her wings sprout. Then she was laughing, soaring, shaping the world again. "Alive," she told Banjax. "Pure dead brilliant. That's how poetry makes me feel." "Boyd, not Boyd, aye?" He winked at her. "And many happy returns, lassie." With all her heart, Una hoped there would be. Yet on her 14th birthday, she wasn't able to visit with Banjax. A wild summer storm had raged through Applethorpe overnight, snatching at the hail nets and unleashing a bombardment that stripped the trees of flowers and fruit. So severely was the orchard hit, so extensive the clean-up required, it took half the morning before anyone could be spared to check on the eye. When Una at last begged leave, she found solar panels torn loose and batteries charred. The eggshell dome, already half cracked, had opened up entirely and admitted several bathtubs worth of rain to slosh down onto the central mechanism. "I'm sorry, love," her dad said. "I know it's your special day and you look forward to it, but the orchard comes first. The crop's near wiped out and the trees are vulnerable now. If pests get in, it'll ruin us." Una nodded. She joined with the other kids as best she could, mulching fallen fruit and selectively thinning what remained in the branches, maximising yield potential. The adults, meanwhile, sawed through broken limbs and smeared paint over amputated stumps. It was grim, depressing work. Damage control at the tail end of an avalanche. Her thoughts turned to the eye. How badly had it been hit? Would Dr. Mungacaria and her husband and the old man, Greaves Mill, be able to repair it? Or was Banjax gone for good? Just when she thought the day had bottomed out, Finlay came lurching along like some gangling zombie and presented her with a carved apple cockatoo. The detail was exquisite. The beak, the eyes, the rippled plumage, and he glazed it with a blackberry preserve, rendering a charcoal gloss to all parts save a sliver of red on the tail feathers. It was beautiful, heartfelt. The timing couldn't have been worse. If only he'd talked to her, she might have been okay. But pictures smeared paint across 1,000 words, and Finlay's sculptures were silent epics whittled from the friendship she'd once shared with him. On top of Banjax being flooded out, it was too much. Una burst into tears. Through bleary eyes, she saw Finlay's head snap up. Una, are you... I didn't mean... What? Eloquent as a boiled egg. And she was no better. When the adults came and confiscated Finlay's knife, wasting good apples, they said, slacking off, and at a time like this, she just stood there, snuffle-sobbing. She didn't set them right on how long it must have taken him to bring that cockatoo to life. And Finlay had no defence instincts. He just curled up and cowered, a spineless echidna, helpless against their allegations. So this is what it's like to be 14, Una thought. Her mind sought refuge in haiku. No, in senryu. Darker, unravelled, only the lines wouldn't come. Cockatoo sculptors cast me to the winds of change? Stone-faced featherlight? She wasn't sure. Without Banjax, she didn't trust herself to find the right path. And when she fled back to the homestead, down to the creek to take silent counsel from Billie Eilish, she was gone too. No tuft of green, no drag marks in the mud. The sun cast slanted regard upon a log devoid of turtle. Una sank to her haunches. Hugging herself, she gazed west and beyond. She wondered, do all rivers beget billabongs? Abandoned loops where idle dries away to nothing? The thought recalled Patterson's jolly swagman waltzing back home to die. The glee of his grab, the grim grown-up gait of the trippers. When Una came of age, would the meanderings of childhood recede into memory? Something about that caught at her heart. She thought to transcribe it, to capture in words its melancholy essence, but she knew she hadn't yet the tools for it, and by the time she did, the urge would long since have passed. That made her cry again. Fat, heavy teardrops as she squatted by the empty log. She stayed there until her dad came and carried her inside. Her 15th birthday was even worse. The year had passed in fractious regrowth, the co-op arguing amongst itself while drawing Una further and further into the adult world. Her dad wanted to prune. He said they should cut right back, rejuvenate the main orchard at a cost of another year's harvest. We'll be scraping by anyway, he insisted. Why not go the whole hog? Commit to the expansion crops, ride out a brace, but look to the future. It seemed sensible to Una. Regress the trees to young uns newly grafted, untwist and unknot them, remove the burden of expectation. Let them find their way. These words resonated, yet not many people agreed with her dad, and when Una voiced her support, Fionnuala Bissett Brown told her flat out she was thinking of herself. "That's what you want," she said, not unkindly, "because you'd rather write poems than settle down and rebuild." That had disturbed Una. She composed a conspirony about it, ironic, working for weeks to insinuate her worries into its 14 beats. "Oughtn't we now intervene, as father first exhorted, kowtow not to cultivars, turned, twisted and distorted?" The conspirony was a prescriptive form. Heptasyllabic lines, trisyllabic endings, cross and circular chain rhyme. But that was the point. The more it boxed her in, the harder she strived to express how she felt. Of course, now that she was done, she fretted about context. Beyond the rallying cry and the woes of the orchard, would anyone twig to her meaning? Sighing, Una pushed up from her crouch. Billie Eilish's log lay sunbaked and abandoned on the edge of the creek, as bereft of testudinie moxie as it had been every day for the last 12 months. Had it been floodwaters that swept Billie away? Had she picked a fight with a kaiju-sized catfish? It didn't matter. Billie was gone, and Una's only turtle friend now was a large rounded stone, which Finlay had painted dun and teal, and had hollowed out eye sockets for, embedding them with green helix marbles. He'd gotten his knife back after the cockadoo incident, but lost it again for fighting. Rock art was his fallback talent. To remember, he'd said, not replace. He didn't mumble, and when he held her gaze, she saw that he'd meant well by it. "Goodbye, B.E., she murmured, scanning one last time for movement against the grain. "I miss you." Lonesome to her bones, she turned from the creek and trudged out past the orchard. Several boys called greetings to her. Rory McPherson even walked alongside her a ways, saying little, but flexing his muscles whenever he had the chance. She wondered, was he offering himself as a birthday gift? Preposterous, she decided. A human amphigory. Huh? You, Rory. Whatever you're doing, please stop. She thought about how he'd tried to impress her at the Highland Games, going up against the men in a misbegotten pledge of heart and hernia. Actions, he seemed to believe, spoke loudest. In rebuttal, she offered him a Clara Hugh. Rory McPherson, a not unstoried person, won lasting fame at the caber toss, which he lost. Rory didn't reply, but from the way he flinched, she might just have wounded him more than when his third caber fell back in a 6 o'clock fail, bounced off the ground and struck him in the man-apples. She said, "Look, I'm sorry, Rory, but that's me. I'm made of words, of thoughts, the same way you're all bulgy in the biceps." Yeah, but opposites do not attract. Complementary attracts. Sure, well, I think you're the prettiest girl in all of Applethorpe. You're... Goodbye, Rory. Something in her tone must have gotten through to him, or the weary despair when she slumped her shoulders. He fell back mid-sentence, receding like one of the old mileage signs on the road north. Broken boughs, blossoms disavowed. Una left him behind and carried on to the ruins. The eye was in a bad way. Whatever semblance of functionality it had maintained, its decline lay exposed now in lashed up piles of circuitry, in wild, almost manically sutured cables. Dr. Mungakaria had done her best. Everyone in the co-op had pitched in where they could. evidenced the heavy-duty tarpaulin strung in place above the rondure. But the only true authority on lost tech was the Eye itself, and its expertise was useless without the requisite materials and a competent human agent. And time, which by Una's reckoning was the cruelest scarcity of all. The knowledge they so desperately needed was being lost to them, because they were all too busy offsetting its lack. Life's downward spiral, apples grown in ignorance. Even now, as their greatest resource sparked and sputtered its last, her dad and the others still tended the orchard, leaving Jebediah Gravesmill to transfer what he could onto e-readers and old school printouts. Even that was a form of triage, tailored to what was immediately germane: medical texts, animal husbandry, sacred teachings on horticulture and agriculture. What of art? Una wondered. What of language and literature? What of music, maths, history, hope? What of poetry? With a wave to Old Man Gravesmill, she picked her way over to the workstation and typed in her ID, not rattling it off as she'd once have done, but rather marking its passing. The code from her dad came next. She didn't know how he'd swung it, but she knew it wouldn't have been easy. 5 minutes. One last birthday wish, congruent with snuffing out the candles. Please be there, she thought. Please don't leave without saying goodbye. She finished the sequence and held her breath. The eye juddered open. Hello, Una. Which? A glitch in the default voice spoke to turmoil beneath the surface. Which aspect do you do? Banjax, please. Acknowledged. This last carried an inflection, as if the speaker had surprised itself, or discovered God. Then the rondure activated. Instead of clouds that cleaved and fused, there manifested a grainy confetti swirl. Indeed, the whole mechanism appeared now to be shaking. Damn snow globe, Old Man Gravesmill swore. But the eye held. Somehow, even on this most ashen of days, enough light made it through to bring a big-eared, hook-nosed poet drifting in from the blizzard. Banjax! He was just as Una remembered, only clean-shaven, his bristles scattered to the backdrop. Catching sight of her, he quirked his lips and pinched the brim of an imaginary hat. Hola, the Spanish say. Welcome to your party. Carrot and stick now. Must me mourn the donkey so dearly departing? Una breathed in the form. That's a flamenca, isn't it? A gypsy cinquain. Moves like a dancer. Si, señorita. Title, Quinceañera Piñata. A parting gift from one old poet to his protégé. Must you go, Banjax? I've so much still to learn. And you will, little lady, with or without me, digging up life's treasures in Spanish silva and with golden shovels, through sunshine and sonnets, cloudy couplets and storm-swept sestinas. Always a custodian, your soul laid bare to the cural's call, and the song to Lockbat, and the lonely howl of the dingadisht. But everything's so hard. The orchard, boys, and there's so much inside of me. I want to let it out, but no one thinks like I do. No one except you and Billie Eilish. A turtle renowned for her scolia sub sotto voce. I miss her, Banjax. I'm going to miss you. And I you, lass. It's the way of the world. But still, he leaned forward, drawing Una closer to the rondure. It wouldn't do to abandon you altogether. And so I've left you some Easter eggs. You have? Una whispered. Lessons, mostly, but legacy notes too, for birthdays and breakups. A wedding, maybe? Or just if you find yourself missing old banjaks. I snuck them into the appendices of Apples and Oranges and Whiffles, the Care of the Pig. Thank you. You're to be master now, young Padawan, the poet of Applethorpe. May you uphold the art and never stop uncovering, nay, coining new forms. Most of all, may your talent bring you happiness, whatever your involvement in matters more mundane. Una trembled, the glass turning molten as she blinked back tears. When she tried to speak, it felt like she'd swallowed a crisp pink. I will, Banjax. I've loved our time together. It's been my pleasure, Una McCool. Now bide a wee, but dwell not, eh? Nothing is lost that is thought upon fondly. Una nodded, quick little jerks of her chin. Landy ahoy, the lookout boy cried, a ghost of a smile on her lips as the ship went down. Then she was crying, head pressed to the rondure, hot tears and butterflies, stomach tight, straining her cheeks to match his weather-beaten regard. Their gazes locked until the clouds came and took him. Then the Eye of Applethorpe closed up forever. Later that week, Una and Finlay cycled north up the highway. They rode in silence, 14 kilometres in wavering convoy, until they came to the Big Apple. It glowered at them from atop its pole, defaced liege of a rock-strewn, ash-petalled fiefdom. Una declared, You never know what you've got until it's gone. When apple-pink blossoms fall, cast to the wind, and death stirs the branches in lost, lonely song, you never know. Who'll read your poems now? The gaunt old reaper grinned. Why not seek solace down at the billabong? Dive in and rest there in peace, hope rescinded. No, life's made of memories. Death's not so strong, to prize free the butterfly essence held pinned in our hearts. Might love forever flutter on? You never know. Roundel delivered. She helped Finlay manoeuvre the extension ladder off their bikes and into position, leant there against the apple's swollen head. She held the base steady while he climbed up and painted out the scowl. Mottled red, cheeks blushed afresh on a promise. Give it 5 minutes, he called. Then I can put in something new. A poem, maybe? Una considered. She thought of Banjax and Billie Eilish, of the aching, yin-yang hole in her heart, but also her dad and Finlay, and painted rock keepsakes, of apples in a tartan avalanche, even poor strutting Rory, and nature's odd bent towards verbless, wordless, ineffable expression. She said, No, Finn. How it is will be fine. Come down now. And so he did, and they pedalled home together, ladder balanced precariously between them, back to Applethorpe, back to the homestead and the enfolding poetry of life.
Once again, that was The Eye of Applethorpe by E.J. Delaney. The author had this to say. The story opens with mention of the Big Apple. Listeners not familiar with Australia and our national propensity for oversized landmarks, especially fruit landmarks, the big pineapple, the big banana, etc., might naturally think of New York City. In fact, the apple in question is a steel and fiberglass sculpture located just north of Stanthorpe in the Granite Belt region of southern Queensland/northern New South Wales. Granite Belt's elevation and climate make it ideal for growing apples. These same conditions, atypical of Australia but reminiscent of the Scottish Highlands, enticed a wave of Scottish immigrants in the 19th century. While Una is faced with an uncertain future, her existence remains rooted in a picturesque past and present where apple trees blossom alongside remnants of Scotch heritage. The transition from adolescence to adulthood is filled with big feelings for which we struggle to find words, making it a time ripe for poetry. In this story, access to the local artificial intelligence, which serves as a repository of knowledge for the community, is strictly controlled because the technology is degenerating, and essential survival needs take priority over literary frivolities. Growing up means taking on greater responsibilities and engaging more fully with the world as it is, rather than as we imagine or wish it to be. And yet, while literal apples may feed the body, the fruits of poetry feed the soul. Equally important when the world is, as Wordsworth said, too much with us. It is up to each of us to carry the seeds of art inside us, to plant them and nurture them not only to sate our own spiritual hunger, but that of generations of children yet to come. Escape Pod is part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Don't change it, don't sell it, please do share it. If you'd like to support Escape Pod, please rate or review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite app. We are 100% audience supported, and we count on your donations to keep the lights on and the servers humming. You can now donate via 4 different platforms. On Patreon and Ko-fi, search for Escape Artists. On Twitch and YouTube, we're at EA Podcasts. You can also use PayPal through our website, escapepod.org. Patreon subscribers have access to exclusive merchandise and can be automatically added to our Discord, where they can chat with other fans as well as our staff members. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju at daikaiju.org. And our closing quotation this week is from the poem From Blossoms by Lee Young Lee, who said, "Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin, but the shade, not only the sugar, but the days, to hold the fruit in our hands, adore it, then bite into the round jubilance of peach." Thanks for joining us, and may your escape pod be fully stocked with stories.